There's a common question that I've heard from a lot of gamblers, and that is, why is it that it was so much easier to win on slots, say, 30 years ago? Many people seem to feel that casinos have gotten tighter over the years, but there's a lot of major elements that a lot of people don't seem to think about. So what exactly has changed between years past and today? Are casinos getting harder to win at? Let's find out in today's video. Welcome back, everybody, to the Cowboy Slot Channel, where I bring you experienced advice from years of working in the casinos, tips, reviews, and so much more. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell to stay notified for when the next video comes out. Why does it seem that as years progress, it is getting increasingly harder to win at slots? Are settings changing? Are casinos really getting tighter? What exactly is changing? Well, it's not what you think. So there's four major elements with this. I'm going to go over all four of those with you, but let's start out with the obvious. It's one that I think we all know and we've all seen and we've all felt, but a lot of people seem to think that it doesn't really relate to gambling, but it actually does play a big role. Number one, inflation. Inflation does happen everywhere across everything, and that includes gambling. As an example, 30 years ago, you could go into the casino with $20 and it would last you a lot longer back then than $20 would last you today. The bets were a lot lower and the machines were a lot less complicated back then. A penny machine, for example, 30 years ago, you could easily get by with just playing a couple pennies here and there. But not today. Today, we see all different kinds of penny machines with crazy bet levels and crazy different line options and all of these insane features. And most of those penny machines require a lot more than just a couple pennies to play. This wasn't the case back then. When it comes to inflation, using 30 years ago, just as a quick example, $20 back then would be equivalent to about $42.67 in today's currency. Amplify that by a few hundred that gamblers normally bring with them, and that number can be substantially higher. The other thing to consider is that yes, game makers actually do take inflation into account when they're creating new games. So new games coming out today, even in the lower bet levels, are going to have a lot higher of maximum bets and different betting options as compared to games back then. Number two is game technology. Technology has advanced more rapidly than anything else that humans have ever created in history, and it's accelerating more and more each day. Now, before you go and think that this has anything to do with weird types of advanced controls or anything like that the casino might have over the machine, it doesn't. Slot machines are not manipulated or altered. This has everything to do with how the game functions from a design standpoint. I'll explain. 30 years ago, we did not have the advanced technology that we have today to make games more advanced and interactive. Things like those hold and spin features on those dragon links and lightning links, the complicated in-depth and interactive bonus rounds, and features like fast stopping, none of that really existed much back then. Older slots were a lot simpler. They had smaller pay tables, and this wasn't just easier for the gambler to understand, but having a smaller pay table means that random number generator has less options to choose from. You have to remember that this plays a huge role in the volatility of a game. The simpler and easier a game is, the more frequently it's going to hit and pay, because there's simply just not as many combinations for the random number generator to choose from. Games today have far more advanced virtual pay tables with hundreds of thousands of different options to choose from in a split second, meaning that you could very well take an older game from, say, 30 years ago with a 95% payback percentage and play it against a modern new style game with even a higher 98% payback percentage, and you're actually going to gain a higher yield off of the older game with the less payback percentage. So why is that? Well, on an older, classic, more simple slot machine, it might only have a few hundred possible outcomes, whereas on that modern game, it could have several hundreds of thousands of possible outcomes. Simplified, a newer, more modern game with a lot of possible outcomes is going to yield you a lot of blanks or a lot of wins that pay a lot less than your bet back. This is also another reason why I always stress to not focus on that RTP and payback percentage, but rather focus on how the game itself is designed. Point number three, despite popular belief, casinos have not gotten tighter over the years. A lot of people seem to be so fixated on that RTP and that payback percentage and what is the setting of the machine, but in reality, those settings really haven't changed. Those settings and those hold percentages, those haven't changed, but the types of games that are available and the way that the games are designed has changed. Before you sit down to play any slot machine, always remember that the more features that it has, the more bonuses, the more progressives, Whatever the case may be, the more features that a game has on it, the harder it's going to be to yield a really good win from that. It's going to make the game not only a lot more difficult to play, but also a lot more costly to play. Unfortunately, this is what majority of slots are in today's market. As the years progress, I'm sure we can see slot machines start to add a lot more features to them that will thus make the game higher in volatility and take a lot more money to play. This right here has been the change. It's really not the casino or the settings or the odds. It's really everything to do with the types of games that are out on the market. Point number 4, getting less than your bet back is actually a lot more common today than it used to be. In the years past, it was the standard to get at least your minimum bet back for even the smallest of line hits. For example, if you were betting $1 back in the day on an older classic slot machine, it was pretty much the standard to get at least $1 back for the smallest of combinations. So why exactly did that change? Well, surveys and studies actually conducted over the years have shown that players were getting bored. So to combat this, game makers developed what we all know and see today and what's relatively commonplace in casinos, where you might be betting $1, but instead of getting that dollar back, you're going to get like 20 cents back or 50 cents back or something. You're going to get a lot more frequent of those teeny tiny little line hits along the way. Why is that? Well, through research, game makers have found out that players are a lot more enticed by the sounds and the flashiness of the machine, that they completely will lose track of what they're actually getting back. As long as the machine is making noise or is doing some kind of a graphic or something, they actually found that through studies, players were a lot more entertained and they held a lot longer at that game. The studies also found that most players will actually ignore the math, or they will quickly tap through it without even really realizing that what they're getting in return is not the same as what they were used to getting. Let's be honest, we live in a world of instant gratification. Everybody has a nose in their screen, and it takes a lot more to keep people entertained today than it did in years past. Slot machines and slot games have had to adapt to this. A lot of things change with time, and slots in the casino is no different. But this situation right here has pretty much nothing to do with the settings of the machine or the operation of the casino. It really has everything to do with just how games are designed today. It's an unfortunate trend, and it's not one that is going to slow down anytime soon. Who knows? If it continues, maybe one day we'll see slot machines turn into full-on video games that players have to make microtransactions just to continue to stay in the game. You never know. It is a lot easier for people to place blame on things like the odds or the casino, when in reality, those things really haven't changed. But what has changed is actually from the game makers, how these games are designed and how they work today. So what can you as a player do in this new world of slots? While older games are getting a lot more difficult to find, and sadly, a lot of casinos have just outright gotten rid of those older classic games, there are still some options. The biggest and most critical thing that you as a player can do in a modern casino is have a lot more sense of self-awareness and self-control. Games today are overstimulating, and they are designed to have an overpowering sense on that reward portion of your brain. So if you sit down to play a game, actually take some time to look at the game rules, and then when you are getting those little hits, actually look to see what your return is and ask yourself some questions. Is this game really yielding what I would like it to yield? Am I burning through my bankroll too fast playing this game? Have I walked around the casino and looked to see if there are other games that might yield a little bit better and make the bankroll last a little bit longer? Take breaks and avoid getting caught up in all of the flash and wow features of a lot of these new games. If you are just playing for entertainment and you really like some of these games, absolutely you can continue to play it, but just always remember how these games are really truly designed. Set yourself a limit and keep that thought in your mind of, okay, I know that this game is designed to pull me in with all of its flash and all of its graphics, and it's designed to make me sit here and continue to feed it. I'm not going to continue to feed it. Always remember that proper slot strategy is not about controlling the machine, but it's about controlling yourself. Give this video a like, a subscribe would be nice, and I'll see you. Thanks so much for watching. Check out these other videos and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more slot tips. It's always free. Visit ropethejackpot.com for free guides and a whole lot more. Catch you on the next episode.